The Indiana
her
Fever,
endurance, her
a franchise often in the spotlight, has been rocked by an announcement that has sent shockwaves through the entire WNBA.
Continuing to
Coach
move
Stephanie
forward in
White
terms of
delivered news that many
mechanics,
believed was
number one.
unthinkable,
You know,
confirming
number
that
two,
three
basketball.
pivotal
She's gotta,
players, Sophie,
at some
Kate,
point.
The ink had barely dried on Stephanie White's contract with the Indiana Fever before league whispers turned into outright shouting, signaling a shift that goes far beyond a routine coaching hire. On the surface, it looked like a feel-good sports story, a franchise icon coming home to guide a young, rising super team. But dig deeper, and it becomes clear this move sits at the center of a brewing labor war that threatens to split the WNBA from the inside out. Everyone knew Caitlin Clark brought ratings and fans, but almost no one anticipated the financial shockwave she triggered behind the scenes. A shockwave now cracking the league's fragile unity. With a Nike deal that dwarfs entire team payrolls and players opting out of the collective bargaining agreement, tension between the old guard and the new generation has reached a boiling point. Stephanie White didn't just sign up to coach basketball. She stepped into a locker room full of unspoken resentment, massive wealth gaps, and emotional volatility. Veterans are watching their influence fade. Rookies are becoming moguls before year two. And White, through recent comments, has all but confirmed what many feared. The noise is real, the anger is real, and this season could become a battle for the soul of the league. To understand why this coaching hire sparked such an intense reaction, you have to look beyond the headlines and into the details quietly circulating among executives and players. This wasn't a simple career move, it was a calculated gamble. Leaving the Connecticut Sun shocked the basketball world. In Connecticut, White built a defensive powerhouse rooted in experience, toughness, and physical play. Her teams were annual contenders, feared across the league for their grit and discipline. She had stability, respect, and a system that worked. So why walk away from a championship-ready roster to join a team still rebuilding and defensively vulnerable? The answer isn't basketball alone. It's power. White understands the center of gravity in the WNBA has shifted, and it has shifted to Indianapolis. That's where the cameras are. That's where the money is. That's where history is now being written. But this homecoming comes with heavy strings attached. When White played for the Fever years ago, the league was defined by sacrifice. Players flew commercial, stayed in modest hotels, and played more for love than financial security. Today's Fever operate more like a touring spectacle, selling out arenas, demanding security, and commanding national attention. League insiders say White's hire wasn't just about strategy. It was damage control. Previous leadership was criticized for failing to protect their star, not only from physical play on the court, but from the relentless off-court chaos. White was brought in as a stabilizer, a shield. But by accepting that role, she placed a target on her back. To the rest of the league, Indiana isn't admired, it's resented. White is no longer just a coach. She is the caretaker of the league's most valuable asset. That position isolates her from peers who feel left behind by the Clark phenomenon. She now represents the future of the WNBA, even when that future clashes with the past that shaped her career. The emotional weight is enormous. She must face former players, war-tested veterans she once went to battle with, while standing beside the very player those same veterans tried to intimidate months earlier. And none of this tension can be discussed honestly without addressing the money. Not just good money, but paradigm-shifting wealth that has completely disrupted the hierarchy of women's professional sports. When details of Caitlin Clark's Nike deal surfaced, $28 million over 8 years, it didn't just set records. It shattered expectations and wounded pride across the league. To grasped the anger. The numbers matter. The maximum WNBA salary hovers around $240,000 per year, with most players earning far less, often under $100,000. Clark will make more from a handful of Nike appearances than legends like Aya Wilson or Breanna Stewart will earn from their basketball contracts across multiple seasons combined. This is the Nike bomb. It created an immediate class divide that no amount of media coaching can disguise. In the same locker rooms, rookies fly private for endorsement work and stay in penthouses, while 10-year veterans worry about pensions and overseas contracts just to cover mortgages. This isn't just jealousy, it's erasure. Many veterans feel the league is quietly telling them their sacrifices kept the lights on, but the future no longer belongs to them. Stephanie White is walking into a locker room where financial inequality isn't a side issue, it's the elephant in the room. How do you ask a veteran role player to dive on the floor, risking an injury that could end her career, to save a possession for a rookie earning 50 times her salary with a guaranteed safety net? That is the coaching challenge of a lifetime. The resentment isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up as a delayed pass, a look of hesitation, or a passive-aggressive comment about earning it during a press conference. And now, with leaks about signature shoes and merchandise royalties, that tension is reaching a boiling point. Veterans are watching Clark receive a signature shoe, something only a handful of women in history have earned, before she's even won a championship. To the old guard, this feels like a violation of the sport's unwritten rules. You used to get paid when you won. In the new economy, you get paid when you trend. That financial resentment was the fuel, but the real explosion came when the WNBA Players Association opted out of the current collective bargaining agreement. This is the technical side of the drama, but it's also the most important because it determines the future of every player in the league. The CBA governs everything: salaries, travel standards, benefits, protections. By opting out, the players are effectively threatening a strike, demanding a larger share of league revenue. But leaked negotiation details reveal a far more complicated reality. Players are pushing for massive salary increases and revenue sharing, pointing to the league's explosive growth over the past year. What few will say publicly, though everyone knows privately, is that this growth is tied almost entirely to one factor: the Clark effect. Viewership spiked, ticket sales surged, merchandise revenue exploded, and it all happened when Caitlin Clark entered the league. This puts veteran leadership in a deeply uncomfortable bind. Publicly, many criticize the attention Clark receives, calling it unfair or media-driven. Privately, that same attention is being used as leverage to demand millions in raises. They are eating the meal Caitlin Clark cooked while complaining about the chef. It's a paradox tearing the locker rooms apart. Veterans argue they deserve more because they built the league. The numbers argue the league is earning more because one player changed the math. And that contradiction is becoming impossible to ignore. Leaked proposals suggest players want a business model similar to the NBA, including a 50-50 revenue split. But league insiders warn the economics aren't there yet. If the league agrees to those demands too quickly, the structure of teams could change dramatically. This leads to the most frightening rumor circulating among players: the idea that higher salaries could actually mean fewer jobs. This is the dark side of the new CBA that nobody wants to discuss openly. Agents and mid-level players are whispering about something called the veteran purge. And the theory is simple, but terrifying. If minimum salaries jump to $150,000 and max contracts rise to $500,000 or more, teams will be forced to make brutal decisions. Right now, teams can afford to keep respected veterans for leadership, experience, and locker room stability. But if that same player suddenly costs $500,000, she becomes expendable. Economics takes over. Teams will replace expensive mid-tier veterans with cheaper rookies to preserve cap space for stars. The WNBA's middle class, the dependable starters and role players who have carried the league for years, will be hit hardest. That's why the tension Stephanie White is managing goes beyond anger. It's existential fear. Veterans don't just see Caitlin Clark as a star, they see her as the catalyst for an economic shift that could end their careers early. As the Clark economy takes over, the league grows younger, faster, and more marketable, leaving the middle behind. White is coaching a team where half the roster is wondering if they'll even have a job in 2026. That reality creates a desperate, cutthroat environment, far removed from the sisterhood the league likes to promote. Every drill, every scrimmage, every preseason game becomes a fight for survival. They aren't just competing for minutes anymore. They're competing to prove they deserve the expensive contracts coming down the pipeline. The irony of Stephanie White's hiring is that last season, she was commanding the other side of this war. As head coach of the Connecticut Sun, she led players like Dejounte Carrington and Alyssa Thomas, figures who became the public face of the anti-Clark resistance. The league remembers the moments clearly: the hard fouls that sent Clark to the floor, the mocking gestures, the tense post-game interviews where credit was deliberately withheld. White stood firmly behind her players, defending their physical style and dismissing claims that Clark was being targeted, calling it nothing more than playoff basketball. She was the protector of the old guard's identity. Now, in a twist worthy of a Hollywood script, she has crossed enemy lines and is responsible for safeguarding the very player her former team tried to wear down physically and mentally. That puts White in a double-agent role loaded with tension. Does she truly have the trust of the Fever locker room after defending Carrington last year? Can she honestly look Caitlin Clark in the eye and say, "I've got your back," knowing that 6 months ago she was designing schemes to shut her down? And what happens when Indiana faces Connecticut for the first time? That game won't just be basketball, it will be a psychological thriller broadcast live. White knows exactly how her former team plans to attack Clark because she wrote the blueprint. She understands their habits, their pressure points, their weaknesses. At the same time, she knows those former players feel abandoned. She chose the golden ticket in Indiana over the grit of Connecticut. That decision adds personal resentment to an already volatile matchup. White isn't just fighting public narratives, she's confronting her own past, while trying to convince the Fever locker room she is fully committed after spending the last year trying to break them. Stephanie White is experienced, media-savvy, and deeply rooted in the game. She knows she can't pretend the toxicity doesn't exist. In her first press appearances since taking the job, one word keeps surfacing: noise. She talks about tuning out narratives, ignoring social media, and locking in on basketball. But by repeatedly addressing it, she's quietly confirming how loud that noise really is. She's admitted that emotional management will be the hardest part of the job. She's dealing with players who check their phones at halftime and see thousands of messages, some praising them, others tearing them apart. The racial and cultural tensions that flared last season haven't disappeared. They've just gone dormant, waiting for the right spark. White's strategy appears to be insulation, building an us-against-the-world mindset around the Fever. But that's difficult when the world includes fellow WNBA players criticizing you on podcasts and social media. White must act as a filter, absorbing the league's toxicity so it never reaches her star. It's an exhausting role that demands far more than X's and O's. She has to be a coach, therapist, PR shield, and bodyguard, while knowing one losing streak could turn the media against her overnight.